Good morning, everybody. University Press has this material, which I'm sure is going to be very helpful. Your set coordinator received a link to be shared with all of you to useful materials for this semester. You will find the curriculum for all 6 courses, the evaluation and assessment orientations, a diagram mapping or as well as the teacher's books. Please do take the time to have a look at all these documents on the link. Well, thanks again for being here with us today. I'll leave you with Ricardo Morales. Thanks.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, all over the country. My name is Ricardo Morales. I am the Academic Services Manager. I'm honored to be here with you. Session, we're going to talk about, we're going to be able to have a walkthrough these components work, okay? I understand this recording, this session will be recorded, so they can have access later on. You can have access later, but it comes in. If you have any questions, the course, the components, or anything, feel free to type in the chat box, and we have a couple of partners to be able to respond. And then at the end of the session, we're going to leave open a quick session for questions and answers, and I'll be at your help, hopefully. Thank you. So let's start all on screen to see on screen now the first and initial aspects of the components that we're going to cover. So you should be able to see that in a few minutes, 2 seconds, I would say. So if you could do what comes on screen, I'll be using my view a little bit, and this is what you should be able to. Good. All right. Probably you can see it now. And you see it now? Yes. Okay, you should be able to see that. Well, that's the cover, that's the intro of what we're going to be presenting. Let me give you an overview, but before the overview, let me tell you a little bit about the course book that you will be using. Actually, Interchange is one of the most successful course books that has been produced throughout the story and the history of English language. And one of the core values for Interchange is to how it helps students develop their communicative skills. So what Interchange does and what Interchange will help you with is creating and enhancing communication across the course book, across your students, and across that ability that they need to have in order to be successful users of the English language. So he has developed also the elements and components that make Interchange. Get into that right now. In case you can, it should be available right now. Okay, yes, there you go, right? Good. So this is what, I'm going to give you a walkthrough. I'm going to give you an overview of one of the units of Interchange. I'm going to give you also an overview of the different components. And I hope that by the end of the session, you have a clear idea on what it is that Interchange does, mainly for those of you who are on course book, and also to see the relevance of all the different components for you. So I'm going to just walk down a little bit, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to give you the overview. Yes. First of all, you would find the scope and sequence for all the course book with the different unit components that are pertinent and relevant to the text. I'll come back to that later. So I'll give you a more enhanced description of what you have here, and I'm gonna give you also an overview of how a unit is displayed and how you can work it out. As I said, Jack Richards is the author for Interchange. He has developed a communicative methodology which has been refined over the years. He does here is allows people understand and use the English language in a good way. Interchange has flexible units. That means that is Workbook can move activities, so you don't have to follow that prescriptively. You can move activities within one unit, so you can work around the needs for your students without any problem. I'll come back to that later. Students speak right from the start. Many course books do not allow students to start working immediately with development of communicative skills. Well, Interchange does. Interchange gives students research and winning content, gives students the confidence to speak early and often. So there's a lot of communicative interaction across the course book. Change. Every unit comes in what we call cycles. So there are 2 cycles for every unit. Each cycle has a specific topic, grammar point, and function. The discussion and role play, and something we call word power. There is reading and interchange activity. The sequence of these exercises differs from unit to unit, but this is basically what you will. This is a screenshot of student's course book. To introduce the unit topic or cycle topic. It presents vocabulary for discussing the topic, uses real world information, and I think that's very important because we want our students, and you want your students, to be in contact with language that is familiar to the real world application. Provides personalized guided discussions and questions, which you will find here. We're going to come back to that later. Then there's a section for conversation. So if you see, right from the beginning, students are allowed to have some level of interactive practice. It comes with, for example, in this case, it comes with some listening. We're going to go to it later on. It will provide structured listening, speaking practice, introduces the meaning and use of the cycles grammar. So what the grammar for the course in that very lesson will be used. And there's, of course, this section to set the scene and illustrate new vocabulary. Of course, there is follow-up to the activities and through different listenings and through different skill development. Then we move into one introduction to what is to be set as a topic. There needs to be the grammar focus that supports what is being taught. For example, you have an introduction. This is for simple past, and the introduction has a listening, and it doesn't explain the rule. It helps students inductively use the language and understand how language works. But it's not an exhaustive language presentation, grammar presentation, because that's not the focal point for the course book. Of course, there's enough grammar recordings, provides controlled grammar, so you can go little by little. So you go from simple to more complex equations and more personalized speaking practice. So there's this moment in class when students can start having more conversation when they with activities and they do nothing about it. It has to do with this is what you are producing now, and then there is this little opportunity for you to start interacting with your peers, so with your students. So if you notice, this is not student frontal type of class. So the teacher, the role of a teacher, I think it's very important here to mention that the role of a teacher is the one of facilitator, the one that helps students discover language, understand language, integrate language, and develop their sets of skills. And teachers have lots of materials and components to develop students develop. Then another aspect here is pronunciation. You will hear throughout and across the course book different types of pronunciation, uh, different types of how pronunciation is used, not in isolated items, but it's also how it is used in context. We have different pronunciation depending on the context we're working with. You can use interrogations, you can ask questions, you can make statements, and you have voice inflection in there. So it's important that students learn how language is used so they don't sound like when we have this flat pattern in which students always talk at the same pace, at the same rhythm, with the same intonation. Pronunciation here gives them the possibility and the opportunity to develop that sensitivity towards using the language in a way that will change what they want to express with more meaningful intonation, with more meaningful voice patterns. Okay? I'm going to move ahead to what we call word power. All this material, by the way, will be available to you, not only in the form of the recording, but also in the form in which you can have access and identify these very components. So don't think that this is just the abstract presentation and then you won't have access to any resource to review any of the vocabulary. Word power is presents vocabulary related to the unit topic. All units are connected through different themes, but they always have this link in which there's going to be a connection. Students can talk about topics within one unit without really needing to be just work loose activities or activities that have a connection always in all the activities that are included there. Word power also promotes freer, personalized practice. Why do we call it word power? Well, it gives students that possibility, their ability to communicate. The more vocabulary you give them in context, the better that your students are start working with to make more complex sentences, to have more expanded ideas, and that way students will feel more comfortable using the language. Then we have discussion. In discussion, then we come into personalization of items. Students are able to bring from their own experience in different topics, working across different materials for discussion. Students replicating. What we're looking for in interchange is that students have that oral fluency and oral accuracy that would allow them to feel comfortable, first of all, using the language, and confident when using it. Yeah. How do we promote this? Well, with the following the sequence that I just mentioned, empowering students with word power and creating useful and engaging discussions so students would be able to start communicating. Now, don't think that the course book is planned only to set students free and that they're going to be over challenged in this early stage. In this early stage, students are gaining confidence, but still it is a controlled environment, so where they feel comfortable, and if there's any problem in terms of not assimilating the context at all, or struggling with some words or with some grammar structure, well, students are still that process of developing their skills. So it's not that you're gonna over challenge your students. It's not that you're going to get your students into something difficult and unachievable. So it takes students like in a follow step process, and the role of a teacher to promote building process. It's still a process in which your students come together. Are allowed to variety of listening skills, such as listening for main ideas and listening for details. And it also includes post-listening speaking tasks. So listening is not only to help students develop the skill to understand verbal communication, but it also helps students listen, integrate language, and also create some speaking tasks out of that. Okay, so I'm going to move on a little bit into cycle 2. This is going to come very quickly, and I'm going to show you now afterwards different components for interchange, all the kinds of resources that you will have and you would be able to use with your students. Before I move, by itself would provide limited learning to students unless it is carefully carried out by the teacher. What I mean is, if your students are just following the course book, learning from there would be limited. They will have access not to many. But on the other hand, if you use the course book creatively, and this is something I really like from interchange, that allows for teacher creativity, I'm positive that you will have wider ranges for success. In cycle 2, here we have, this is within the same unit. Yeah. So in cycle 2 we have conversation. It's still about the topic that we are having as part of the unit. It also covers different aspects such as the grammar that is to be used. It comes under a topic, and the function. The student will be able to describe past vacations. And what we mean here, grammar and function, is yes, there's the grammar structure that is to be covered, and there is also the function in which that grammar item will be used. It starts cycle 2. In this case, it's not the same pattern in all the cases, but in this case, it starts with a conversation. There's listening before the conversation. Conversation helps students set into the right context, and students are able to identify from this conversation what it is that brings and empowers students. Then we have what we call the realistic context, the grammar pattern or the structure pattern that is to be used. Okay? And then we move on into discussion. Discussion here is about personalization again. Students are in a less controlled scenario. Students are in a possibility of developing their skills in a more productive way. There is group work. There are different interaction patterns to be used. Topics to them. Now, it's important to mention that interaction patterns are to be managed differently in each class. It depends on the number of students you have. It depends on their background. It depends on their level with what you want to achieve in class. Another aspect that I would like to mention from interchange is that possibility of having very clear objectives in the course book. We're going to talk about that a little later. Then there's also the writing and reading skill development. There are sections in the course book that will help students develop their reading skills, their writing skills, and those skills, I would say, that are usually the most underestimated, underrated skills. We sometimes don't have time in class. We sometimes don't have time in class to develop their listening. We sometimes don't have the time in class to help them develop their writing. We sometimes don't have the time in class to help them develop their reading skills. What happens here in Interchange is that it allows for student writing, student reading, student integration of skills, which is also very important. It's never seen as isolated skills. You know that there has to be interconnectivity among skills, so it will help us develop both or different skills within one activity. So there's writing, there's listening again. You may say that much listening, but I would like to draw your attention that the listenings that come with the course book are really limited in terms of length, so broad in variety, broad in content, but they are not these long listenings in which students go back and do something with information. And this is something I would like to highlight here. Every time there's a listening, students need to do something with that listening. So it's not just listening and understand or try to understand what happens with that information. It's listen, integrate that information, and do something with this information that comes into something that has real life application. Okay? So basically, this is the overview of Cycle 2. I'm going to mention here about reading. Reading is also extensive, but not extensive in terms of how boring and difficult and challenging it would be for students. It gives you the possibility of breaking items into a reading in different stages. It will give you the possibility of have graphic support to your readings. It gives you also the possibility of exploring the reading in many different ways. So even if you have large classes, you don't need to expose your students to very long readings. You don't need to expose your students to all a reading. For example, the one I'm showing you here that comes in 3 sections. You can have group dynamics there. You can, if time allows you to have longer readings, that's fine. But sometimes, and this is one of the worst enemies for teachers in a class, which is time. At times, you don't have a lot of possibilities to have time devoted to reading. So what it is that you do? Well, you can segment the reading and ask some students to read and share and synthesize information and help other students from different segments in the reading understand also what the segments are about. So you can promote class interaction here. You can promote group dynamics that would help your students develop skills within one reading. So reading is not limited to just read something and then explain what they understood. It's segmented, it looks for different particles, it helps students identify what particular aspects in a reading is coming or are relevant, and it also helps students identify how they can synthesize. So this is, and it always comes with pre and while post reading activities. Okay. Now, what happens in the back of the book? Well, in the back of the book, there's a handful of resources for you to develop students' abilities. As you know, not all of your students are at the same level. In an ideal world, all our students in the same class have the same level of understanding, the same level of linguistic competency. They have the same level of English in general and the same learning styles. But you know, being experienced teacher, that doesn't always happen. You know that at times we have students in one course are not at the same level, are not at the same level as the other. Hope you can read me now. I me now. Back provides opportunities to consolidate new language in a creative, fun way, promotes fluency with communicative activities such as discussion, information gaps, and games. So, this is for expansion. That doesn't mean that you have to use it all the time in all the courses. Remember, this is support. There is always, oops, okay. I'm gonna go a little bit down. Bear with me. I hope I didn't get dizzy. I didn't get you dizzy with this. I'm just going back into where I was. Okay. Grammar Plus explores the unit grammar in greater depth. There is always a student. There are always students who need more support in grammar, who need more help with some grammar topics. Well, there you have a handful of resources you to work with the grammar that is pertinent to every. And then there's online self-study. I'm going to go back to online self-study later on. Right now I'm going to switch into showing you a few components or some components from the course book. Please let me know if you can. Well, don't let me know anything because I cannot hear you, but I suppose that you can see my screen. It looks a little bit blank now. Don't worry. I'm just making a transition here. It's you should be able to see it in any second now. Therefore, interchange. The good news is that you will have also access to the digital version for interchange. We call it Presentation Plus, which is going to allow you to have these interactive patterns with students with different elements. If I may draw your attention to the top part of the screen, this digital component, student's book, workbook, you're gonna see the zoom in right now. Okay, it's coming there, maybe a little bit to the top, a bit higher. There you go, perfect, thank you. If you could zoom in a lot so they can identify. I'm going to go over this bar now. So it's a student's book, it's the workbook, it's the video resource book. There's video, there's the teacher's edition here, and there's the set of assessment that you will be using in your course. In other words, you won't need to carry tons of course books, tons of printed materials, tons of students' books and workbooks, and then the video, and then the video player or the DVD player or the VHS player. Well, nobody ever uses VHS anymore, but you will have everything in one single component, and I think that's the great thing about the use of Presentation Plus. How it works. This is the digital version. The digital version will take you through all the pages for the course book. This is page 1 for level 1, for example, and it starts with a snapshot. The very first question, where are you from? It's the purpose for this is introduce oneself and others, and the function is talk about yourself or oneself and learn about others. There is conversation. And in conversation, you should listen, and you click the listening part from here. So you don't need to take your old tape recorder. You don't need to take your.
C. Richards.
Okay. Okay. And here's a section.
Unit 1. Where are you from? Page 2. Exercise 1. Conversation. Please call me Alexa. Listen and practice. Hello, I'm Arturo Valdez.
And it comes the different, or to follow, or in case you want to follow that with your students. That with your students, you will be able to give them access to the script, and then you close it, and then you can create your class dynamics here. You can ask your students from the very beginning. You can ask your students to get engaged in that, and you have the graphic and the visual aspect that will support the course book in there. You can have I will show you in a few minutes, in a few seconds, better. So if there is something you don't want your students to see from that very lesson, because you want to have a kind of an activity in which students will have a different interaction pattern, you can hide it, you can blank it for your students, and then you can ask some interrogative, well, you can ask them some questions like, okay, for example, where do you think she's from? Who's she looking at? So you can have these intro questions to help them activate their scheme, and then you can show a little bit on what your students can see or not. So you can do many things with this. This is just one of the examples. What else can you do with this, with your lesson? You can attach links to any part of the lesson that you feel that it's relevant. Maybe here you have some information that you would like to add, and you find that there's a link that would be relevant to your students. You can add a link, you can add some notes, you can erase something from the text. You can always undo everything, and you can save your lessons, so so you don't need to start creating notes for your classes every time you're going to teach a lesson. So as you can see, the interactive version for the course book is going to help you out in your classes to get your students engaged. If you want to draw your students' attention towards something relevant and specific, that's important for them to notice. You would be able to do it. You should also be able to always go back to the same size. You are able to have additional information, so they can concentrate, or they can have those elements of support. This better concentration, but it also better understanding of things. Okay. Then there's pronunciation. As I mentioned before, pronunciation is important and is relevant to what is being said throughout the course. Students are going to be exposed to different pronunciation patterns, to different intonation. It's not only American English; it's people all over the world speaking. Because in real life, that's how we interact with the language. We don't speak English only to native speakers, not anymore. In a globalized world, there are chances that many of their interactions in communication will come through different users from different nationalities. So there's also focusing pronunciation. There's also a grammar focus, and students are able to understand how the language works. There is also here the reference. Remember, I showed you a few minutes ago that there's Grammar Plus, the expanded version for it. You can jump into that from here if you want to, and you can move and come back to where you are working. Okay? A little bit. I'm going to show you a couple of things. Here we have a snapshot. Again, you can do different things with the snapshots, such as hiding some information for students, not making it available all the time. Play a little bit with them, have some guessing games with them, try to identify, try to do different things with it. There's also, again, I said the additional notes or the support notes. And this is how the student's book works. I'm not going to go into the workbook right now. The workbook functions follows the same pattern, I would say. But what I want to show you now is the video. Video for interchange is very exciting. It's really interesting, and it comes with real life situations. And I think that's an important part for students to have a better comprehension of the language. We should be able to see the video in a second, or not. Okay. Hang on, give me just 1 second. There's something with here with my computer, so it has to do with my broadcast. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to show you the. Just a second. I'm trying to fix this so you can watch the video. Here it goes. Okay. The difficulty is that
Listo.
okay. Okay, sorry, we had some difficulties. I'm just gonna give you of the video. As I said before, video comes with real life situations. It comes also with pre, while, and after tasks. I'm gonna play a little bit of the video.
Mike O'Neill. O apostrophe N-E-I-L-L O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Just 1 moment, please.
Thank you.
Hi.
Linda, good to
Hi.
see you. How's it going?
Fine. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Hey, Linda.
Excuse me.
See you later, Linda.
See you later, Mike.
Excuse me, this isn't mine.
That's strange. Oh well, I'll just get you a new one. Here you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Mike O'Neill.
What'd you say your name was again?
I'm Mike O'Neill.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm Bill Anderson. Nice to meet you, Mike.
Good to meet you too.
Hi. Hello.
Hi. Excuse me.
Hey. Hi, I'm Rachel Stevens. Welcome to the
Hi,
conference.
Rachel.
I volunteer with the Family History Association. You from around here?
Oh, no. I'm from Chicago.
Chicago.
Thank you.
And what do you do, Evan?
Oh, well, I'm a doctor in a hospital. And, family history is really my hobby.
Oh, okay.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Nice to meet you.
Parts of introducing one another, to use discourse markers, to use conversation strategies. Now, video resources will help you come with activities that are relevant and pertinent to what is being seen throughout the course. So the video resource book comes with different elements that are related to what they have just seen. So this is a pre-task activity, and then we have while watching activities, so you can play the video a couple of times, and then follow-up activities in which students would be able to personalize activities that you have in the video resource book. You won't really need to prepare additional material for your students to make the most out of a video. So again, the strategies here are very useful. There is always a set of resources that would help you how to teach using the video resources that are displayed across the different units. here is, for example, the preview, then the activity while they watch the video, then some very specific things to identify, because that's part of the learning process. It's not only understand language, but also perhaps understand paralinguistic signals, those signals that are not necessarily related to the language, but how people communicate, for example. So there's lots of things you can do with the video. There's the guidance. Video resource book will help you what to do, how to use it, how to make your classes more interactive with the video. The video segment for interchange is very comprehensive. It really comes with lots of high production values. It's really good for students, easy to engage with, and easy to follow. So there's a lot of information for the teacher on how to use the course book and how to use the videos. The video, we just saw an episode, yeah. I won't bore you with watching more video, but I would like to set of resources for your students to work online, outside the classroom, to give them additional possibilities for them to work. The interchange homepage, which has more resources than the ones I have already showed you. We're going to go into more resources in a few more seconds. There's also a link to the Cambridge Dictionaries online. And if you need support, there's also the link where you can get support if you have any technical problems. I'm going to show you a couple of things that are related to the self-study and the games that students have for students to practice. So if possibilities and if structure allows you to have some work and some playing with your students in class or outside of class, students will have access to an online component, and you also have access to that online components. For example, this part of games that we're seeing now, we have different challenging games. It's this kind of arcade games. It's not just a very simple stack of sentences or nonsense playing games. It has to do with challenging activities for students that they can play online. They can play at different levels. I wish you were here with me so we could play together, but time will allow us sometime, right? To have access to this. Students are engaged in situations in which they have to identify. Let's say, okay, I'm going to jump. It's wrong, so I have another chance, and I lost a life. So it's really challenging to play with. So it's not just like, here's another boring game. It's time for students to really prove their language development, and it gives you the score. It tells you how many lives you still have. You can change the volume. You can ask questions, right? And it stops a little bit. It says, well, choose the correct word to play, etc. And then you can go back to the game. So it's ludic, but yet very well designed and crafted for students to have that learning approach into a more ludic way. And it comes with other games. You will have access with. There are other components, and the self-study mode will take them basically here. It's here we are. I'm going to come to a self-study class for you to take a look at. And you would be able to see what kind of content it is that students would be able to work with. Students would be able to work with content that is, of course, related to the course program, of course, related to the units that they are going to be using and covering throughout the different stages. Yep. And they would be able to, give me just 1 second. I'm just going to, I came back to the activity that I just showed you. Just in a second, I'll come back to show you. Okay, just going back. Okay, scrolling down. Oh, here it goes. Okay. It will come in a second. And you have the self-study for your students. This self-study is developed for them to have autonomous, independent learning outside the classroom. So this is work that you can assign to your students, or you can emphasize your students to work with this content, with these components. And the idea here is that they have additional practice. I would say that it's never too little to have additional practice. But again, it doesn't mean that you have to give them all the vocabulary activities all the time. It doesn't mean that your students need to work with all the grammar exercises, listening, speaking, reading, video. I think this is gonna help you to have more direct work for your students whenever they need to work with something very specific. This is not for you to assign to all your students, not necessarily, unless you want to do it. But in a regular class, as I said before, you have students who have developed different skills, or they are at different levels for development. So it's good always to have additional support that comes online and will help them build the structure that they need to work with, or it will help students to build the skill they need to work with, or just to have following the course book is that your student to use with your students. And I'm going to move on now into resources. The resource, this is for the digital course book that you will have. The resources that you will have access to in there are something like this. You should be able to have it's unit 1 for level 1. It's countries, nationalities, and languages, irregular verbs. Yeah. So these are word lists, verb lists for students, adjective lists for students also to work with. And that's for you to make them available to students. This is printable, photocopiable material. Yeah. Think that you are infringing any law if you are using this material with your students. You have that possibility to use. And then we also have the teacher's edition, teaching notes. So everything you need to know on how to teach with interchange comes here. It comes for different levels. You have the PDFs. If you don't have them, I think it's really assessment program. One of the cover a program, there's a language program that is to be covered, but sometimes the assessment that perhaps does not cover the profile for your students. So one of the advantages here is that you have different components for assessment. You have a question bank for the speaking activities. You can choose if you're going to have oral exams in your students. You have a bank of questions to ask. You don't need to ask all students the same questions. You know, we sometimes have these oral exams in which students are lining up outside the classroom, and you ask students to come to your desk and ask. Then you have banks of questions for students, but that's not the only thing you have. You have suggestions or the way you are going to administer a test. It comes with directions, guidance on how to administer the test. The answer key, of course, we need to know. And a bank of items for the test, which comes with listening. And this is a Word document, so that means that you can create a new test every time you can add, you can eliminate, you can include or not include some components. This is for the listening part. This is for grammar and structure comprehension. Then there's another section that also covers grammar and structure. questions, true, false statements, and so forth, right? And and it has different sets for your students. So you have here different documents. You have the audio files that you want to include, of course, in your text. You have A version, you have B version, you have the scripts in case you need them, you have some reference, you have the answer keys for the different versions, okay? So as you can see, it comes with a very comprehensive suite of components for you to be able to administer the test to your students at any given time. And you also have, okay, you also have a placement test, yeah? It may be administered in different ways. Of course, that's an institutional decision, how the assessment process will take place, but rest assured that you have all the components you need for your students to be assessed in an adequate way. So you have the placement test for your students, different levels, and you should be able to administer. It also comes with the audios. So far, I think in this hour and a few minutes, we have covered many of the components that you have for interchange. You have an overview of how one unit works. You have an overview also of the different components that are relevant to the course book. I'm going to move back a little bit. I'm going to go back to the student's book. I understand that my colleagues and your coordinators are responding to some questions. I don't know if there's any specific question that I can answer in case something has not been answered yet. Should we open up the time for some questions in case there are any questions? If not, I can also show them a couple of other things that I have left out.
Yeah.
Okay? Is that what I should do? Okay, perfect. What else am I going to show you? Well, more than showing you, I want to go back to the very early stages of this presentation, and one has to do with a course book. A course book is going to be as relevant, is going to be as complete, and is going to be as comprehensive, or as good, if you want to call it that way, as what you do with it. Yeah. The teacher's edition for the course book gives you lots of guidance on how to work with your students, how to work with students with different learning abilities, how to work with your students at different times, how, if you can zoom in with the course book, but you can also be like a very prescriptive teacher, if you know what I mean, in terms of like, I'm just here to follow the book, and that's what it's going to happen in my class. Or you can be as creative as you want to with every single activity here. If you have noticed, interchange gives you a wide variety for your students and a wide range for your students to practice and to develop their communicative skills, their speaking, their listening, their interaction. This is what interchange is heavy on. But it also allows for teacher creativity in many ways. So you can ask your students to use different intonation patterns, for example, for conversation. You can ask your students to have that conversation, but it's not between two friends, it's between two people who don't like each other, just to say something, right? So they would need to use that linguistic intonation patterns that would allow your students to work with the aspects that are relevant to their course book. Okay, that's one aspect I wanted to mention. So it's going to be as engaging and it's going to be as communicative as you want to make it. And I'm sure that with your expertise in teaching, our expertise in developing materials, you would be able to have a very successful course using Interchange. That I can guarantee. And 25 millions of users of Interchange throughout the history of it wouldn't let me lie into this aspect. Okay? I'm sure that we will have a course book. We are partners in this. We are not just Cambridge providing you materials and that's about it. Quite the contrary, we are here to help you make the most out of your course books. We are here to help you have successful students. It's relevant that the new generations of teachers that you are forming have that linguistic domain that is relevant to the use of the language. So on behalf of Cambridge University Press, be sure that we are here to help you, we are here to support you, and that we are here to provide you as much information as possible. Before we leave, there are a couple of announcements. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Ricardo Morales. I'm the Academic Services Manager for Cambridge University Press. Don't go just yet. There are a few more messages before we finish this session. Thank you very much. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to say hello to you.
Webinar today, I don't know if you all could see the first part of the webinar, the introduction. I hope so that you can get the webinar and hopefully. I was mentioning at the beginning that we send you a link, we send your stage coordinator a link where you can check the curriculum for all the 6 levels that we have available for the Normales curriculum. That is, that's not necessary that students of first semester, so that you can organize your students according to their level of English and not according to the semester. Like, for example, at the English class time, your students will have to go to the level they belong. So they can go to course 6 or they can go to course 1. That depends on the level of their English. You have all the 6 courses, that link, and you also have the teachers materials, and the books. The books are ready. We're just waiting for all your state coordinators to tell us how many books you will need, and according to the levels. That is how many. It's of course it's an approximate number of how many A1.1 level books you will need, how many B1.2 books you will need, etc. So that talk with him, and you can ask the books directly to Cambridge University Press. That is all for now. We'll send you